good to be here. You know, Bozeman has just been so great, you know, throughout this campaign. I think Bozeman has been probably the one I've seen the most excitement, you know, behind the campaign. And some of the rallies we've had here have just been amazing. The first one we did up at MSU at the ballroom that just felt like it was a national event with all the, I think there was probably, you know, 350 to 400 people in that room, but it was incredible.
Well, so if you'd like to start off with something that you'd like to make certain that we hear, and then I'm sure we'll have questions. That seems like the way to go.
Well, of course, the first question I always hear is, why are you running?
Yeah. That's probably something that you think about deeply yourself.
Or maybe the first question was, why in the world would you want to get into the down and dirty world of politics? Which I'm finding out is pretty down and dirty, but I guess the short answer is that you know, I really feel like I've been representing the state of Montana all my life, you know, through my music and my poetry and of course, you know, I've been a board member of the Montana Arts Council for 11 years, and also we were invited by the Department of Commerce to me and my band to go over and be on a cultural exchange to Kumamoto, Japan for 3 consecutive years, which was such a great honor. And I think that, you know, when I was first approached about doing this, and I had to really search my soul about you know, about throwing my big and well-traveled hat into the ring, that it came down to the fact that I just love the state as much as anybody, and I just could not stand by and see some of the things that have been happening to the big sky here. I realized that through my travels throughout the nation that many other states have lost their access to public lands. Some of the people I know in other states have to travel for 100 miles to be able to access our public lands. When I lived here before I went on tour, I kind of took it for granted, but seeing what other states have lost, I realized that this is a precious resource, and this is what makes Montana what it is. And so I think that was probably the main driver behind me getting into this race, is my love for our public lands and our wide open places. I grew up in Cut Bank as a rancher farmer's son, and you know, just in a matter of minutes you could disappear into some of the most beautiful landscapes in the world, and it was here that I learned my love for Montana's wild and beautiful wide open spaces. And so, but it's been really gratifying for me to, for all the support that we've gotten throughout this process. And I don't think I've seen the state this fired up about an election forever. But I think it really came down, I think the final thing that really put me over the top was that quote by Ernest Hemingway, that our lives are measured by the magnitude of the challenges we accept. And I realized that there could be no greater challenge than this one, but it's one I had to accept, given my love for this state.
Are you driving, or you want to?
Go ahead, jump in. So I know better with this group.
So the elephant that's in the room is, what's the story with the banking, apartments, taxes?
Oh, yeah.
And I don't mean to be pointing to the negative right away. Just that's what seems to surface, and I'd love to hear your response.
Okay, well, you know, to me, I was really surprised about this, because on a day when, of course, I had just finished a roundtable, you know, yesterday, with all these great women's groups, you know, some of the best legislators in the Billings area, and then of course, you know, with Comey and being fired, and I was amazed that people, you know, wanted to make this the main story, but you know, the thing is, you know, of course, I had some tax issues, you know, that was, and some healthcare issues, and I've been very open and upfront about this. The very first speech I gave in public was laying this out. It was at a healthcare rally in Missoula at the Missoula County Library. And I talked about this in great length, about the issues I had, where I had a botched surgery that really sent me into a spiral. And it couldn't have come at a worse time for my career. I was in the 4th year of my 5-year plan. I had the best musicians in the big sky. I had a bus and a sound company, and I had a record contract offered from Warner Brothers Western Division. But this surgery just, you know, pretty much sent everything into a tailspin. I had to have several reconstructive surgeries over the next several years. I lost my band, had to sell the bus. And of course, since I couldn't tour, I lost the record contract deal too. And so, you know, this was something that carried on for many years. And then, of course, coupled with my wife was she's a real estate broker, and when the Great Recession hit, it was like a perfect storm for me and my family. And so then, but you know, it's the fact this didn't stretch out over 16 years. That's wrong. There was an incident that happened where we had a contractor and we paid him off in 4 months' time. So that happened in, I think, 2001. And then, but then I think that the other episodes took place, I think, in 2007. But the thing is that we persevered and we powered through it. We probably could have declared bankruptcy, but we didn't do that. And we powered through, and we paid all of our debts, you know, and cleared everything out. And so, you know, to me, it's really, I think it's important to know that we've done many public appearances, town hall meetings about healthcare, and time after time, people would stand up and share stories just like mine. And to me, I think that the people of Montana really appreciate someone who's gone through the same issues that they have to represent them, and who understands what they've gone through. And to me, that's one of the other major reasons why I'm running, because I think that we need someone who can relate to the problems of people who've had issues just like mine. As far as this thing with the last thing, you know, this is a property that I'm not a legal owner of, you know, so for the Billings Gazette to bring this up, I think is, you know, this is out of my hands. I don't own that property, you know, so the fact that they're saying that I didn't show income from that, well, I wouldn't, because I don't get income from that property. And so, but I think the point is that, you know, we kept going, we persevered, we paid off all of our debts, and so everything's paid off.
Thank you for
Yeah.
your answer. Appreciate it.
I lived and worked in Washington, D.C. for a few years. Very happy to see my rearview mirror when I left. The 4 words of the key to success in Washington are watch your back, Jack.
Yeah.
I think James Comey could tell us something about
Yeah.
that. When you get to the Congress, if you win, you'll be 435th in seniority. You'll
Yes.
be at the bottom. You'll have the worst office
Mm-hmm.
in the House of Representatives. How do you see yourself starting to gain influence and gain power and
Mm-hmm.
influence things for Montanans?
And you bring up a good point, you know, because I wouldn't have the lowest seniority. But the thing is, to climb any ladder, you have to get on the bottom rung.
Yeah.
And so I think what you do is you form coalitions, you know, with people who are in the same kind of situation. So congressmen from other states that relate to the same issues that we do. Also, it seems that wherever you go, there's always what I lovingly call a Montana mafia. You know, even when I was in Nashville, some of the greatest booking agents and managers were people from Montana who've risen to the top, because I think it's because we have this rugged, individualistic spirit that allows us to really, you know, do the best wherever we are. And I know that there's a great resource there too. I've been to Washington, D.C. many times throughout my career playing music, and so I think I've already begun reaching out to some of the contacts. And I think that's how you do it. You build coalitions. And I think that throughout my whole career, I've made a point of making personal contacts with people, you know, from both sides of the aisle. And I would have to say that my role model in all this is Mike Mansfield, you know, how he was able to have personal relationships with people and not put up walls, but you know, keep an open door and work on the things that you agree on and form the common ground. And then on the things that you don't agree on, then you can compromise, you know. So that's how I've approached my life and my business, and that's how I would approach this the same way.
Key to the support structure for our new congressmen are their staff. The staff really has to be there and be effective. You would not inherit, obviously, Zenke's staff, should you?
No, I would not want to.
And you wouldn't want to, certainly. But how would you go about finding the right people for this,
Well,
both locally and in the
yeah.
city?
Well, first of all, I think that, you know, a lot of my campaign team, I think, would be well qualified to cover both here and in DC. And also, I'm really good friends with John Morrison, who's our state auditor, and his daughter works for one of the senators there, and she has agreed to help me put together a campaign staff, you know, with really qualified people. So that's kind of my first foray.
Get you off the ground faster. They know the ropes. While
Yes.
you're learning the ropes out there.
Yeah, and that's the key to talking about staff. I think that you know, one of the things that's going to be important about this job is to maintain a connection with the constituency. And you know, you've seen those organizational charts where it has the CEO at the top and of course the vice presidents, but I'm flipping that chart to where the people of Montana would be at the top, and my staff, to keep in touch with every facet of Montana, and then of course I would be at the bottom to be a servant. Mariah Gladstone, who works in the Tribal Affairs Office, she's also my liaison to the tribes, and I have great connections all over Montana, just through my travels. I've played in every small town and every big city and every community throughout the state, so my connections go deep and wide across the state. Probably more than I think than any representative of Montana in the legislature for many, many years. So my connections, I think, are pretty broad. Yes.
What committees appeal to you, looking ahead, if you were to win? Where would you want to plug into?
I think the first committee I would probably would be our Veterans Affairs Committee, because Montana has such a high population of veterans per capita, and my friends in the healthcare industry tell me that we are going to be inundated with our veterans coming back from these wars, and they're going to need help, a lot of help, and they're going to need a lot of assistance too. So that would be the first one. I've actually been thinking about some programs, involving that. Not only, and of course, you all know about the whole situation we have with suicides as well. That statistic is just overwhelmingly high. But here's a program that we've been working on. I've been talking with my right-hand man, who has been in my band since 1987, and he plays every instrument that you can think of. And we're talking about a program called the Band of Brothers Project, where we get communities to donate musical instruments, and then ask the musicians of that community to have jam sessions for these veterans and teach them how to play instruments. And of course, I know firsthand what fun jam sessions are, but more importantly, to create that band, that's what they're missing. When they get back to the society, they don't have that Band of Brothers thing to work with. And of course, talk about the perfect thing for a healing, the power of music, the frequencies that go through you, and to teach you how to express yourself, which is what I think they're having trouble doing, and the camaraderie. So I think it's going to be a real important thing, and I think the musicians of Montana will really respond to this. Oh, and I was going to say some of the other committees I really would like to serve on would be the Indian Affairs Committee too. I think our reservations have really been struggling with some mighty challenges, and having grown up across the river from the Blackfeet Reservation and being really connected to Indian country all my life, some of my dearest friends are tribal members, and so I really feel like I want to be an advocate for them as well, which I don't really feel like Indian country has had an advocate in this seat since Pat Williams vacated in '97. And so that's going to be a high priority for me too.
Are you surprised by the national response from the Republicans that are showing up in Montana for your opponent? Has that been something that you expected?
I have to say I'm really gratified by that, because the fact that they're trying to throw all their big guns, that means that they are very worried about this.
That's what it does mean.
And and I think that you've seen poll numbers that this was 2 weeks ago that there was a poll that came out that had us within single digits. But I think the important number in that poll is among likely voters, we were only 1 point down. And this was before the whole health care question came up, and of course with Comey being fired. And I think our numbers are going to be even better than that. And what we're really seeing as far as response on the ground, it's been incredible. There's groups forming across the state called Republicans for Quist. I'm loving that. And even the Libertarian candidate from the election cycle before, who was Rick Breckenridge, he called me and he said, Rob, I have to tell you that my Libertarian friends, they watched the debate. They think that Mark Wicks is more Republican, and they tell me they're all voting for you. So, but and I think that just the news on the ground is really positive. We have the momentum on our side.
As far as healthcare with the bill that was passed by the House last week, what's your, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at that in much detail. what are your thoughts about that, and how would Montana voters expect you to vote for or against that?
There is a big backlash. I mean, everywhere I go, people are fired up about this. You know, the women's roundtable I had, I mean, talk about, you know, some fired up women about this. I mean, first of all, let's just talk about all the things they haven't had, you know, the people at the table who need to be there. There were no women on the discussion. There were no seniors, nobody representing veterans or also Indian country. And once again, I mean, let's just look at the precepts. It would raise premiums by probably $300 or more per person. There would be an age tax for seniors between 50 and 65 years of age, having to pay 5 to 6 times as much as everyone else. And of course, you know, cutting Planned Parenthood, that's been a big concern of not only, you know, the women of Montana, but you know, everybody else who kind of relies on that as well. You know, cuts to the people in Indian country say that this would be, to repeal ACA would be devastating to them. And I mean, the list just goes on and on. And once again, tax breaks for not only the rich, but special tax breaks for insurance company executives. So this is really, I have to say, it's a bad one for the country, but it's really helped my campaign because our fundraising in the last few days since they introduced this has just gone through the roof. We're approaching $4 million in contribution, and I think a large part of that is the fact that they're trying to pass this disastrous health care plan.
Who are some of the dark money groups, either behind Mr. Gianforte or behind you? I can't get the fine print off the screen quickly enough as the ads do this all evening.
It's the Congressional Leadership Fund, and
who is that really? What's that?
that's, you know, that's groups like well, of course it's run by, you know, Paul Ryan, and you know, but I think the big funders for that are people like Sheldon Adelson, and you know, and there's all these different groups. There's corporations, you know, I think that kind of have ill designs on our beloved Montana. I think that one of the reasons they're backing Gianforte is that you know, he says he's for keeping public lands in public hands, but you know, he's campaigned with Rick Perry, and Rick Perry has been an advocate for transferring public lands into private hands. That's his thing. You go to Texas, Texans don't have any place that they can go, you know, recreate, and so. And of course, this healthcare plan too. You know, Gianforte said that he wouldn't have voted for it. And of course, then you probably saw that New York Times article, you know, where he was saying a different thing to donors. You know, and but I called him out in the debate. I said, that the Congressional Leadership Fund was threatening legislators with defunding them if they didn't support it, and they doubled down on Gianforte. So that spoke volumes to me about where he stands on that. So that's kind of the good.
Well, who's in your fine print?
You know what? This is great. We have, I think we have almost 150,000 separate contributions at an average of $25 each. This is a grassroots movement, and I'm not sure. I think that, you know, maybe last week sometime, I think it was 2/3 were from the state of Montana, but I think that may have changed now that we're getting a lot more national attention, and people are seeing that they want to support my campaign. So, you know, I think that's probably changed somewhat, but by and large, it's $25 per contribution. And I'm loving that because, you know, this is truly a grassroots movement. And that brings the point up about, you know, that we already have too many multimillionaires in Congress now. We need someone who's going to represent, you know, the rest of Montanans, and so that they have a voice. Our founders of our Constitution, you know, I think that they intended this office to be a representative of the citizenry, and it's the U.S. House of Representatives, and so I think that they would be appalled by the lack of equal representation in this office, and so that's why it's so important. I think that the people of Montana are behind me.
Why are the Democrats? Why is the National Party so slow in getting behind you? I mean, I'm really bugged at night. I get all these calls from diverse Democrats, as Will Rogers said. I don't belong to any organized political party.
I love that quote.
And I say, well, what are you doing about the Quist campaign? And the phone goes dead at that point. Who? What?
Well, they
I
are.
said, I'm not contributing until you guys know what's going on.
Yeah.
They don't seem to have any awareness.
Well, they are. They've come in. They're actually spending $600,000, much less than the $2.5 million that the Congressional Leadership Fund is putting in. But they are. You know, I think they're recognizing. I think that they were waiting for this race to get a little closer, and since it has, now they're coming, and I think their timing is fine. And quite honestly, you know, I really feel like we didn't need them. You know, I feel like we're bringing this home on our own, and I'm really proud of that. You know, I have one of the best campaign staffs that can be found in the Big Sky country, and I know that part of that is because this is one of the few elections going on in the country. But you know, they're just an amazing group, and so ever since we started this, you know, from the primary on through, it's just been a constant build of momentum, and so now it's really gaining strength every day.
So, come back to healthcare for a second. Obamacare and healthcare reform was designed to address access, costs, and quality.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do differently given the implications of higher prices that I think we're maybe not anticipating? It's a lot more expensive now. What would you do to change it to make it better?
Well, I think one of the first things we could do would be the cost of pharmaceutical drugs. You know, they're astronomical. They're way out of proportion. And I have a personal story about this. My wife, Bonnie, is allergic to bee stings. I almost lost her 3 years ago. I just barely got her to the clinic in time. And for her to have that EpiPen, as you know, is $500. Well, she can get the same EpiPen, the same brand from her relatives in Canada for $20. So, I mean, that's how out of whack our pharmaceutical drugs are. And, I mean, let's look at this too. My opponent, Mr. Gianforte, has $2.5 million in stocks from these very companies that are gouging the people of America. And, you know, VA are able to negotiate prices, but people on Medicare are not. You know, that's fundamentally wrong. I think one of the big problems is that we have the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical drugs at the table making our healthcare decisions. And that's why it's even more important that we have someone that's going to represent the people of Montana and this nation at the table making our healthcare decisions. I think other ways that we could cut costs would be to have price transparency so that hospitals would be required to post what they charge for each individual procedure. And I know that you know, that would be predicated on some facilities having better equipment, but I think still people need to know. This whole system of coding is really complex too, and so I think some medical facilities are taking advantage of the situation because it's such a complex issue. And I met with the Montana Hospital Association, and they told me that one way that they could bring down costs would be to lower administrative costs. I think ours are at 25%, whereas Canada, their administrative costs are 16%. So those would be ways I think that we could really bring down. And, you know, to me, it's like I said, it comes down to having the right people at the table making our healthcare decisions.
At the end of 2 years in office, assuming you're elected, how are you going to measure whether you're successful or not?
Well, I think that it's, to me, it's if I've been able to you know, to mitigate some of the problems that are here in Montana, I would like to focus on helping our Montana farmers and ranchers get higher prices. I would like to help some of our reservations, you know, with some of the issues that they're facing with the economics, you know, and unemployment, and the fact that they have food deserts, and I think that, you know, I think being able to you know, help bring tax breaks to small businesses as opposed to large corporations that outsource jobs overseas, you know, that would be you know, that would be a success. And, you know, overall just improve life for people under the big sky.
About jobs, you talked about public lands are good. I mean, healthcare, I agree. Veterans, I think those are all good issues. But again, we come back to quality jobs, and you can get a job in Bozeman, but we're talking about a job where you can raise a family and put away and get a house and things like that.
Well, and I think that brings up a great point, because to me, it's all about, you know, Congress is made up of over 300 millionaires, and I think that they're slanting the game, you know, in their favor. And so we need someone who's going to stand up for small businesses and give them, and for the middle class. Because when I was younger, there was a pretty healthy distribution of wealth across the classes. And you've probably seen these charts. But if you look at that same graph now, it's flatlined across the bottom through the poor and the middle class. And when it reaches the super wealthy, it just flies so far off the page, you'd have to stack 10 pages just to get it on the graph. And I was talking about this at one of our meetings up in Shoto, and about how an economist was saying that the super rich become that way by not paying other people to value their services. And this is classic. This old rancher stood up in the back and he said, Rob, money is a lot like BS. You pile it up, it just starts to stink. But if you spread it around, it grows everything. I thought, partner, there's a Montana analogy. But it really is a good analogy about how, that we need to get, flow going, and that's what happens. And I think that it's like a rising tide lifts all boats. I think that's a John Kennedy
Sure.
quote. And so I think that that's how we do it. And quite frankly, I think what really started, the whole prosperity through my childhood was the fact that Dwight D. Eisenhower, had a higher tax rate on the rich, and so instead of, since that it didn't work in their favor just to keep it piled up, then they reinvested in infrastructure and businesses, and that really created, I think, the growth that happened, throughout the 50s and 60s.
You mentioned getting higher prices for farmers and ranchers. How do you do that?
I think right now it's, you have to form really strong bilateral trade agreements. I mean, obviously the Trans-Pacific Partnership was never implemented. And so we have to, my family still has a farm and ranch up in North Glacier County where my grandfather homesteaded. And so I think that we need to there's situations that happened with NAFTA where, here's a classic example. My family, they sold their grain to a gentleman from Canada. He took it up to Lethbridge and had it reclassified and then brought it back to Great Falls and got a higher price for it, as a food versus feed. And so, we need to, those are things we need to tweak. We need to keep the borders open longer, for farmers to be able to have access back and forth. And, and work on these bilateral trade agreements with other countries. I think it's important that if we don't do this, it allows other countries to come in and take markets that our Montana farmers have had. Our farmers really import or export 80% of the grain that they have, and so if it stays here and just stays on the ground, that doesn't help anybody. They had one of the best years that they ever had last year, but the price was so low. I think in a 9-month period, the prices fell from $4 a bushel down to $2, and so it didn't matter, because the bumper crop that they should have had really was not beneficial. So I think that's how you do it. You have to work on bilateral trade agreements.
What about the next farm bill?
That's coming up for renegotiation here next year, and I'm very concerned about this because this administration wants to cut funding for it. So I think that farmers are going to have to realize that they're going to have to back someone like me who's going to stand up for them in this, and we have to have a better safety net for our farmers as well. And that has to be in this next farm bill, so that'll be renegotiated this coming year. So.
What do you think the legislative bodies, both the House and the Senate, need to do or should do regarding climate change?
Well, to me, Montana has a real opportunity to be a part of this. With all of our opportunities for wind and solar here in the Big Sky country, we can kind of get out in front of this. We can create new jobs, and at the same time, we can reduce our carbon imprint. And we know where my opponent stands on this. He basically came out and said, well, it's not worth doing because if you close all these power plants, it would only drop a tenth of a degree or whatever it was he said. Well, to me, this is a cumulative thing. Everything that we can do is going to be a big cumulative effect. And I think that there are companies forming now here in the Big Sky country that are going to be cutting edge. And if we can encourage them, then I think we'd be in a great place. At the same time, I think we can't just pull the rug out from our coal industries because, first of all, if we close down the 3 and 4 plants in Colstrip, and they close up, they would not reclaim the land. I visited Colstrip, just recently, and saw the reclamation, and it's pretty incredible how they're really they actually take drone footage of the land and restore it to exactly the same topography. They've actually got the same percentage of plant life that was there before that they replant. And when we were out there, you could see deer and elk, kind of running through. So, and I think the important thing is that we have clean water, through all this process too. But I think our energy plan has to be, a balanced plan. It's going to be a slow process to move away from coal and oil, but it's one I think that is eventually going to have to happen. And we need to have an energy plan that's built for Montanans, by Montanans.
What's your position on the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, I'm curious, voter turnout is always an issue, especially, in a special election. What is your strategy for getting people to vote? I think that will make a big difference for you.
It's amazing. I talked about how energized, Montana is, and we are having volunteers turn out like you can't believe. We have offices in all the major cities, and people are turning up to volunteer for us. And every office I go into, there are people making phone calls, and so volunteering to knock on doors. And I've done a lot of door knocking myself. It's actually pretty fun. And they're all having great experiences. They tell me that only 1 out of 20 people that they're knocking on doors are not having it, but everybody else is on board with it. So, and so I think that that's the whole thing. Is that just having a great amount of volunteers in every town, especially all the major voting blocks, which of course is. I think that Yellowstone County is the biggest, and as we know, Gallatin is going to be really huge in that too. But that's going to be how we're going to win this, is the excitement that we have from our volunteer staff.
And what does your polling currently say?
Well, it says that right now that it said that if you polled voters, that we're only down by, I think, 8 points, or some say 6. But if you look at likely voters, and I think that the Democratic base is really fired up, but among likely voters, and this was 2 weeks ago, we were only down 1 point. And that was before all the health care and all the Comey issues came up. So we're seeing a lot of excitement and enthusiasm for our campaign. All of our events are just stacked to the max, and people are wildly excited. So I'm really encouraged by what we're seeing.
So are those internal polls that are showing it that close amongst likely voters?
Well, I think that we have one internal poll, and I think that there was, even in that leaked audio thing from the New York Times, they acknowledged that it was down to they were talking about that. Gianforte and all the people on that call were talking about how it was down to single digits too. And that's why Vice President Pence is coming out, and Donald Trump Jr. So that's why they're coming out here, because they're seeing that too. And we have the momentum.
That's right. Well, voting actually started in Gallatin County about a week ago with absentee ballots. What is your position on the future of Social Security and Medicare? Kind of important to
It really is.
we're Montanans.
Here's the perfect example. Max Richmond is the president of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. And he sent out a questionnaire to me and also one to Gianforte, who didn't bother to fill it out, but he loved my answers. And he loved the fact that I said I would be resolute in protecting that. And so he made a trip all the way out from Virginia to appear on several town hall meetings about this very thing, and to give me their endorsement. And because he knows that not only will I protect it, but I have experience in this too. One of the reasons that we got through our health issues is that I was able to take Social Security much earlier than I wanted to, but given the health issues I had at the time, it was something that I had to do. So it literally saved me and my family from having to go into bankruptcy. And so they know that they have a real strong advocate for these programs in me. And so I will definitely fight for them. And I have many friends that that's the only way that they're subsisting, is just through their Social Security. So these are programs that we can't cut. We have to have someone that's going to stand up for them. And once again, if we let the multimillionaires have it, they'll just cut these programs and give themselves more tax breaks.
Speaking a bit of the race tightening up, are you still anticipating that Bernie Sanders is coming to stump for you soon?
He is. And Bernie, the thing I like about Bernie is that he is a man of the people, and he's running a grassroots campaign, and that's why I relate to him, because he's fighting against these same corporate interests that are controlling our the government in Washington D.C. and so that's why I'm really was encouraged that he wants to come out and campaign with me, and he is very conscientious about making sure that he votes every time. And so we're trying to work that out as to when the exact time is perfect for him, but it'll be in the week prior to the election.
Okay.
So he will be here.
Where's he gonna be?
We're gonna be, I think there's 5 events altogether: Missoula, Bozeman, Butte, Billings, and is there one more? There's one more, maybe Great Falls.
I'll have to double check.
Yeah, I'll have to double check that too.
So, I have to confess, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for 25 years. Have a lot of exposure to the arguments that many people put forward. A couple of things that I would share. You know, pharmaceuticals can make a difference in healthcare in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
And the research that the industry's done has been a consequence of the prices that they're able to get.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make sure we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater
Right.
and jeopardize future cures by a short-term,
Mm-hmm.
concern about prices. That said, your example is a good one that says
Mhm.
the price is awfully high for something that's dramatic.
Mhm.
I think the data are about 10 to 15% of healthcare costs are pharmaceuticals, maybe it's up to 20 now.
Yeah.
So you still have 80 to 90% of the problem if pharmaceuticals were given away free.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Well, I'm not saying they should be given away free.
I understand. So I guess the question in my mind comes back to where do you start? Do you build those coalitions you've talked about with the right people at the table to make sure that the decisions are good? And would you exclude the pharma companies, or would it be something you'd want everybody to participate in?
Well, I think that's what you do. You have everybody to participate. I mean, that's to me that's how you make solutions. Is you involve everybody. You can't exclude one group for the for the benefit of the others. I think re-importing from Canada would be a good place to start. That would I think that would really help to because I mean, if these pharmaceuticals are good enough for the people of Canada, surely they're good enough for the people of the United States. So I think that would be one place. Create a healthy competition. So that people can't take advantage of a situation where it's like a monopoly. And I really feel like it is kind of a monopoly, especially since the people from VA can negotiate as a whole, but Medicare can't. That's not fair. I think that competition is healthy, and that's where it should be. So reimportation, I think, from Canada would be a big factor.
Go ahead, you sound like you want to.
I will, but you go ahead, 'cause it's not an urgent.
I wanted to give you an opportunity. You've given a taped interview here early before you were chosen as a Democratic nominee, and a wide-ranging interview about lots of topics. One of those involving assault rifles has gotten a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And in that interview, the taped interview talks about that you felt that those needed to be registered, and I guess I've heard you say since that that's not your. You felt like that article was not representative of what you said, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that.
Well, what I was referring to when I talk about assault rifles, I'm talking about fully automatic. That's what my intent was, and not ever wanting to own those. I come from a ranching, farming family, and gun safety is a way of life, and it's a time-honored tradition, as I mentioned in that, to bring meat home to the table, which I've done several times throughout the course of my life. But as far as the fully automatic, I'm old school. We were taught that if it took you more than one shot to bring down a big game animal, you probably shouldn't be in the woods. And so, since I would never have a fully automatic weapon like that, I wasn't aware that those are already required to be registered. And that's what nobody's saying. Nobody seems to know that those are required to be registered. And so I think that's a point that needs to be made here. And I think it's important to realize that the fact that Gianforte is trying to make an issue out of this is really duplicitous, because he is with these groups that are trying to take our public lands. And the number one reason that people no longer hunt and fish is loss to access to our public lands. Our sportsmen know this. They're endorsing me. I'm endorsed by the Hunters and Anglers and the Montana Outdoors Alliance PAC. They understand that that's the key issue here. And so I think that's the important thing to realize. And I hope I clarified that. I will say this too, that I've got guns that are much older than the number of years that Gianforte has been in Montana.
So you felt not that so much that you were misquoted, but that a misunderstanding about
Yeah.
what the issue was.
Yeah,
Is
and
that fair?
that's what I felt I was talking about, so, and I thought that's maybe maybe Troy didn't understand, but that was my intent.
Okay.
I didn't really, maybe misquoted wasn't the right word, but that's what I was speaking of. Because, I mean, to me, that's what assault rifle, or I guess it's actually AR, the AR-15, it doesn't mean assault rifle. I think it means air-light rifle or something like that. But that's what I was referring to, is when you hold the trigger down and it squeezes off 30 rounds in 8 seconds. To me, that's not sportsmanlike at all.
Okay.
I hope I clarified that.
What's your take on the re-examination of the national monuments all over the country?
To me, once again, I think that this is, it took years, for these monuments, and with a lot of public input, to be brought into place. And this is another reason. I mean, to me, this is another assault on our public lands. I've canoed the upper Missouri River breaks many, many times in my life, and the fact that we're revisiting these, is I'm very suspicious about this. And once again, I think it's being represented by people that who have ill intent for these, and so I think that these. We need to keep these in operation the way that they are, and so I don't think they need to be revisited.
So you've certainly had an opportunity to be side by side, Mr. Gianforte, in several instances, and you know each other's platforms and beliefs very well. I always wonder, we hear a lot about what you each think of the differences of your positions. Is there something that you've come across during this campaign where you've agreed with Mr. Gianforte, where you think, that's a good idea, he's right about that?
Oh boy, I'd have to think long and hard about that one. Because I often say that I really could not have found a person to contrast the way I stand with Mr. Gianforte. I mean, from public lands, I think, which is my big issue, and I have to say too that I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but this is the 1-year anniversary of when that story broke about him blocking access on the East Gallatin River, and it was the Bozeman Chronicle that did that. So happy anniversary, you guys.
Thank you.
But I guess it would be hard for me to point to one thing. I don't know. I really can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay,
I talk about Montana values, and I don't have anything against him being a multimillionaire, but I do have a problem with him bringing those values of taking public lands away from our state. And to me, that's not a Montana value. And I think this race comes down to the values that we have in Montana. And it goes. I mean, we have such different views on public education versus wanting to fund private education. I guess maybe the one thing I could agree that we need to work on bringing more economic growth to Montana. That would be probably the one that I would agree on. And I think he's done a good job as far as bringing technical jobs to Montana. And perhaps maybe he should focus on that rather than running for first governor and then House of Representatives. If that's his expertise, then maybe that's what he can do for the state of Montana.
Fair enough.
What about timber management?
I really believe in collaborative programs, and here's a classic example, and this is one that I hope to institute when I get into Congress. I have one of my dearest friends and someone I still play music with started a program called Wood for Haiti, and the whole idea, they've been working on this for 5 years, and the whole idea was to take this beetle-killed lumber, and he's worked with architects and builders creating these structures which would be community centers and hospitals and housing, and the whole goal was to ship those down to Haiti. But due to the corruption down there and the sheer cost of transportation, it really hasn't been implemented. But to me, this would be something that would be good to focus on in the state of Montana and the reservations as well. And to me, this is a win-win-win situation. You remove all that the dead lumber from the forest, which are going to burn. Then you also it's an infusion into the wood products industries, for removal. And then you'd have the builders that would have part of that would infuse money into their economies. And then, of course, you'd have the end goal of having these community centers or hospitals or whatever you wanted to use them for, and housing. So to me, those are the kind of things that we need to work on, which are a collaborative program.
So sometimes I cover this stuff a lot, and lawsuits lock up a lot of timber sales. And a lot of times people say they want more timber management. They say we need to open up the Endangered Species Act or the Equal Access to Justice Act and National Environmental Policy Act to head off those lawsuits more or less. Where do you stand on that? Would you like to see changed any of those to?
Well, I think we have to take it on a case-by-case basis. There are places in Montana where, first of all, it wouldn't be practical, to log, and plus, we have to really keep an eye on species extinction. I think that's going to be an important thing to keep an eye on. But there are other places where we can have multiple use, for Montanans. I know that the Blackfoot Coalition is one of those. It's a little bit controversial. Of course, Senator Tester, I came out for when he came to the Rich Ranch and was talking about that very thing. But I know that some of those who are all about protecting habitat for lynx and grizzly were not in favor of that. But I think it has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. I know that to me, it's once again, it's getting everybody to the table to come together with solutions that work for everybody. And I often say that life under the big sky has to work for everyone, or it doesn't work for anyone. And so when you get people together, much like the Northern Plains Resource Council does, where you get everybody to the table and work out solutions that will work for everyone.
So
Go ahead, sir.
Oh, you've been waiting.
I had one, I forgot that I had one, so I have to admit. You mentioned Montana values. And one of the things that has come up repeatedly in here are some of the incidences of hate that have happened throughout the state in the past 6 months to a year. And I don't know if we have this sitting in front of us, I don't know if you know about the fact that there was a flyer distributed around many neighborhoods in Bozeman over the weekend that is just a hate-filled, in fact, we can give this to you if you want a copy. And I guess my sense is that we've heard for all these incidences of hate, remarkably little from any of our leadership. And I'm curious, sort of, if you were to take office, what would your response be to things like this, or what would your stance be?
Well, I had some personal experience with that. First of all, one of the song I close every one of my shows with is a song called Back in Harmony, like it used to be. Take a little part of you, add a little part of me. No one has to lose if we disagree, so let's get me and you back in harmony. I have a friend who is by the name of Tanya Gersh, and she is the one that was the subject of that alt-right hate thing up in Whitefish. And of course, it was just awful to watch her go through this. I mean, she literally had PTSD from the whole incident. And so, of course, the community rallied around her. And then they were going to have this whole big rally and there were many unsavory characters that were showing up, but they couldn't get a permit, so they couldn't march, and they were going to march down the street with their rifles, and kind of make a big show. Well, they had the community of Whitefish threw an event on Martin Luther King Day called Love Lives Here, and it was at the Alpine Theater, and they asked me to perform in that, and so I sang that song I just talked to you about being in harmony, because to me that's what it's all about. We are all children of the earth, and we need to regard each other as such, and really move away from this whole thing of suspicion and fear, and to really resist people who are spreading it. To me, it's a quality of bullying. I do a lot of anti-bullying seminars. And that's the classic traits of a bully: intimidation and humiliation. And of course, the most cowardly of all these is cyberbullying through the media. Does this sound familiar about my campaign, right? But anyway, so I sang a song that it was my campaign song, but it fit perfectly. If you stand with me, I will stand up for you. And I dedicated that to Tanya. She wasn't in the crowd that night. She and her family were clear out in Florida. But to me, this is something that we just really have to work on. And this has been a theme of my whole career. I've toured nationally and internationally with a Blackfeet Indian singer-songwriter talking about these things, about harmony between cultures. And the fact that we have an administration that wants to cut our National Endowment for the Arts and our Endowment for the Humanities. This is what gives us knowledge, you know, to be kind to each other and to learn about each other and to gain understanding. And so, so we have to move away from this whole thing of xenophobia and create fear and create understanding. And that this is something that's one of my core beliefs. I talk about my relationship with Native tribes, and I've really gained a lot of my core beliefs from them. Precepts of honoring Mother Earth and all of her inhabitants, and to never question another person's spiritual walk. That's something I've learned from my Native friends. And I think that, you know, especially now, how they honor not the person who accumulates the most wealth, but the one who contributes the most, who gives the most away, who's the most generous. And so these are facets of Native philosophy that our society really needs to learn.
We're up against our hour. Is there any other questions that anybody's?
I was going to just ask about, you know, healthcare reform is clearly high on the radar. What about tax and economic issues? What's your thought as you approach this on that area?
Well, you know, taxes, I think that, you know, once again, you know, that's why we need a representative of the people. We need to give tax breaks to small businesses. I'm a small businessman, and I'm an entrepreneur in the true sense of the word, where I've made my whole life, you know, on my creativity. But it's a lot, but, you know, small businesses, you have to do everything. I've had to learn to become a booking agent, a marketer, you know, into promotions, a band leader, and, you know, of course, a recording engineer. But that's what small businesses do. And we have to recognize that small businesses are the backbone of our state. If you look at the difference, there are 3,078 large businesses, but in Montana there are over 115,000 small businesses, and that's what's driving our economy. And they need someone to represent them, and we need to give tax breaks to our small businesses and to our middle class. And that's what's going to jumpstart our economy, and not give it to big corporations that outsource jobs overseas. You know, so that's why we need equal representation. And quite frankly, that's why I'm in this.
Was there anything in closing that you'd like us to know that we haven't talked about already?
Well, I just think that, you know, we were talking about just a minute ago about this very thing, and to me, these are people ask me about Montana values, and I often say that Montana is a land of untold beauty, but it's a land that can be, you know, unforgiving for those who aren't hardy and resourceful, and that's what's made us, you know, to me, sometimes people describe Montana as poverty with a view. But I really think it's really taught us how to be resourceful, and that's really a Montana value. And I love the fact that we are so diverse. We've had Indian tribes that have been here for countless generations, and immigrants from all over the world, and we couldn't be more diverse. But to me, I think one of the things when I went to New York City, I was struck with the fact that all of a sudden Mission Mountain Wood Band, we were dropped into a city that had 8 million people, but we realized that the closer the people live to each other, the farther apart they become, because then you start putting up the walls. You know, you hear about people panhandling you, and then there was, you know, somebody being robbed right next door. But of course, Montana, we're still connected to our frontier roots, and I think that the farther apart that people live from each other, the more neighborly they become. We're neighbors to each other, and we rely on each other. And when we have disagreements, we work them out with respect. And respect is something that's sadly lacking in Congress these days. And that's a Montana value I plan to take, you know, into the Congress with me. But anyway, it's just been such a great honor to be in this position. People are amazed that I would want to give up my life as a as a performing artist, which I dearly love. But as I said, this is just too important. And so I'm just really gratified with the support we're getting, and I think we're going to bring this home.
But can you give up your hat at the door of the House of Representatives?
I will do that. I'll take my hat off once I get inside. But let's talk about the hat. You know, there's been a lot of talk about that. But to me, I think people have to understand cowboy culture. You know, people in my culture are rugged and independent, and you know, and it's they're salt of the earth people, and you know, honest and with integrity, and you know, willing to swing their favorite girl around the dance floor in a breathless dance, and ready with a quick poem or a joke or a song to kind of lighten the mood. But But usually the only time that Cowboys take off their hat in public is for the national anthem and for a prayer, so. Because they don't trust it, if you put it down, somebody will sit on it or put it down wrong, and so.
Yeah.
But anyway, you know, yeah, once I get into the halls of Congress, you know, once I get through the door, I'll remove my hat.
All right, well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the
Thank you.
time, and I
Thank
think
you.
it'll be great.
All right, I just want to say that you know, it's really been great, the response we're getting in Bozeman. Gallatin County is just turning out for us really big time. All the events we have are just been so full and so excited, and so I know that this is going to be a key area in the state, you know, to bring us over the top, and I really feel like Gallatin County is standing behind me. So just want to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you.
Great.
Great.